or if you're from the other point of view, it's been played and lost. What's your overview of the game?
Well, let's say, first of all, congratulations to Hawthorn. They thoroughly deserved their win. There's no doubt about that. They played superb football yesterday all over the ground. They took the initiative from the very first bounce. Their defence was superb, led by Kennedy and Robertson. They started every attack. And, of course, they had great assistance from Mew and McCarthy, and O'Halloran supplied the muscle. And we must say this to McCarthy, too, that he had Merritt well covered. And, of course, Mew against Danaher was a good move too. And we must say this too also, Ron, that in attack we found that this fella here did some reasonably good things too throughout the game, like most of the players. But there's no doubt the star of their forward line was Lee Matthews, possibly the oldest player on the ground. And of course Matthews, the older he gets, the better he gets, and the more constructive he is. And of course he set them alight with 6 goals, and it was a bit unfortunate he kicked, I think, 6-5, and could have easily created a record in a grand final. Of course, I just felt that Essendon Erd, they should have put Ron Andrews in the 20, because the moment they lost their 4 tough players, the players that have set them up for the last 4 weeks, particularly in the finals, the other players came back to their normal size and they didn't have the vigour that we expected from Essendon. It was a disappointing display. As a matter of fact, it's one of the worst performances I've seen in a grand final for many, many years, and that includes some of Collingwood's debacles too.
Lou, I thought one real move was Nagel got right on top in that second quarter. It was a great move by Jeans to bring DiPierdomenico on and put him straight onto Nagel.
That's right, and of course you notice that Jeans had a set plan. We must give full marks to Jeans. There's no fuss about his coaching, but he had a set plan. He had Mew and McCarthy and players picked out for different players, and the moment they moved somewhere else, he found out that they went with those players.
How did you vote on yesterday's game, Luke?
Well, I gave, it was a difficult one because you could have even given 6 or 7 players in the Hawthorn lineup a vote. I thought that Lee Matthews played a superb game, kicking 6 goals, and he was the master of this side. A great leader and a very inspiring player. I gave 2 votes to Robertson. He was the running player from the back line, and of course he created many attacks, or started many attacks for Hawthorn. But I thought that the fellow that played the game of his life, the best game on the ground, the best game I've seen him play, was young Kennedy. And I think his dad, John Kennedy, one of their great coaches of the past, would have been very proud of the son's performance yesterday.
OK, we'll be back to talk about ruck play with Peter Keenan in just a moment.
Ron, but Hawthorn players capitalised on him. Madden tended not to get it to his players, and overall, I suppose, Payton was put in there for the simple reason he was there to stop Madden from really getting a clear shot at these Rovers. But and he did it. That was the first knockout of the day, and Payton got it. But after that, Madden started to get on top and bash the ball. But Hawthorn always usually ended up with it. And Matthews, even at one stage there, was going to go back and take the into the centre. But Byrne tried very hard for a left-hander and worked well, whereas they didn't have any bearing on the game at all, I didn't think, the Rucks, because they took a couple of marks between them and struggled. But yes, Peter, what's wrong?
Is the fact that Madden dominated the ruck, yet Hawthorn kept taking away, does that mean that the knock ruckman doesn't matter in football these days?
Well, it proved yesterday you really didn't need a knock ruckman, because every time the ball went up, a Hawthorn player sharked the ball or was neutral. And it was a hard thing to say that, but we might be redundant.
What about being a bit versatile and back over here to something like that and bring the ruckman back? He just pelted it down the ground all the time.
Yeah, well, that's the job of the ruck coaches, the particular club that teaches players to do that. And I've worked in the under-19s this year with our blokes.
Who coaches them up there?
Who does that?
It is no good trying to tap the ball down to players that are just not on the game. His idea from the halfway through that first quarter was to hit it as far as he could down to their forward line, because it was patently obvious as the game wore on. It was patently obvious that there was
I didn't know. I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't know you coached him.
Coach. I just thought it was sort of worth mentioning, Sam. But overall, I would say that Payton virtually did a great job in the ruck, because he bullocked around the ground and gave, I would say, the Hawthorn little blokes a real go.
Look, I'm a great admirer of Payton's, but Madden played a magnificent game in the ruck. He was absolutely superior in the ruck all day, and he hit the ball. It's no good trying to finesse the ball down when the 18 other players are just not with it, and they were too mentally stale, and they were Hawthorn were too fresh in mind. Hawthorn were too fresh in mind and limb, and to try and hit the ball down to players that were just never in the game.
Don't you palm it anymore.
Wouldn't have been worth a try.
Look, if you listen to what I say, if you try and get the ball as far down to your forward line from the centre dominance, because there was no one taking it out of the centre, as Peter, the only accurate thing he said, they sharked the ball. And he was completely dominant in the ruck, Madden. If you don't say that, well, you weren't there.
I agree if he was dominant in the ruck, but how many kicks, when the game was there to be won or lost in the second and third quarter, how many, and Madden is a great marker around the ground and a great kick getter around the ground, how many kicks did he get?
Look,
One.
Oh, you're going to ask the question and answer it.
Well, he's done that for you.
No, you are singling a player out. The side was comprehensively beaten for the whole day, and you're starting to say how many kicks did he get round the ground. I thought he did a great job, Madden, yesterday under extreme adversity.
Your votes for yesterday's game, Peter?
Yes, I gave one vote. I gave one vote to John Kennedy, who worked hard in the half-back line, a lot of run off him, and he played on Rene Kink and shut him out of the game all day. And I gave 2 votes to Colin Robinson for the job he did, and tagging, and 3 votes to Chris Mew, who started it all, because he played on Terry Danaher, and he's the key, and he cut the key out and went on to be a great player and best in the ground as far as I know.
Well, we'll hear the other side of the story in just a moment.
Richard Loveridge has been one of the bonuses of the Hawthorn side. During the year he was ill and had some lung trouble, and in the last couple of weeks he's right back to his top form, and Loveridge was easily the best rover on the ground yesterday. Around the packs he had support from Tuck, of course, and Tuck was virtually a rover yesterday because Colin Robertson did the ruck roving job when he was told to pick up Timmy Watson, and went everywhere that Watson went. That move, of course, was extremely successful because Robertson was amongst the best 3 players on the ground, and his constructive play with his handball and everything else brought other players into it. But I felt that Hawthorn went in there with a definite plan. They expected the fact that Madden was going to get the knockouts, and Hawthorn right around the ground rove to Madden, and they worked their plan to that accordingly. And I felt that Essendon did not have any plan. At no stage did they try and change and tap the ball over the back. There seemed to be no cohesion between Bahaja and Ezard and these smaller players with Simon Madden. I agree that Madden was Essendon's best player. But when you're going down and you're being beaten as badly as that, you have to try something different. And we saw Madden there, and I really felt sorry for Madden with those 2 handballs that he gave out. And I hope after the game Richard Loveridge did say thank you for that one that came out on that occasion. But as I said before, Loveridge did well. Bahaja, as usual, tried hard. I felt that Ezard, inexperience, probably told. And you do need that finals experience, and well, they got some of it yesterday.
But, Bob, you say Madden would try something different if they're getting beaten, but that's exactly why he did those handballs. He tried to get the game going, and under pressure he lost his control a bit because he tried to inject some different flavour into the game, and he made those errors because of it.
Well, the handball side of it is being done by everybody in the game, but as far as the actual ruck work is concerned, if the knock down the centre is not coming off, surely you've got to work in with your rover, change the game a little bit, and rover, whatever it is.
But what's happened to the ruckman that used to do this and that, or better still, go like that, like that? Why couldn't Matt have done that a couple of times yesterday? Because he had control of the ruck. There's a lack of thinking somewhere, isn't there?
You could not be critical of the endeavour put in by Simon Madden. He tried his heart out yesterday, but between the whole Essendon side, Sheedy did throw them around a fair bit. In fact, up to 10 minutes into the second quarter, only Walsh was still on his original opponent. So he did try things, but they were just outfoxed all over the field.
Your votes for yesterday's game?
I thought Lee Matthews played a great game too. I just couldn't quite slip him in, but I thought Rodney Eade, around the ground, every time he got the ball, Hawthorn finished up getting it. Colin Robertson really did the job that was asked of him, was magnificent. But in the first quarter, when the game was really there to be won, I thought that John Kennedy across the half-back line, he even finished up kicking a goal, and he certainly played a magnificent game.
OK, we'll be back to ask Bob Davis about the centre lines in just a moment.
Ground paves the way to success, and yesterday was no exception, of course, with Eade, Wallace and Schwab, who played extremely well for Hawthorn all of the game. Wallace, I thought, played an extremely fine game. He took the ball away. He was in the packs all the time, and he seemed to follow it up. Even if he missed the ball the first time, we'll probably see an example of him a little bit later on that I'll pick out to you. But Eid, that's Wallace taking the ball away there now, getting it up to the forward line. Some people say he does play a bit short, but he seems to look where he's going. Nagel started to get the ball quite well, actually, and I thought he could have been in for a great day, but unfortunately Jeans had the answer for him. He put DiPier Domenico onto him very quickly, and he seemed to slot Nagel out the game a little bit, although Nagel didn't have the time that he normally has to do the clever things that he does, because he is a very accomplished player. I thought that Wood, unfortunately, probably with the spell, this is Kennedy there taking the ball on Green, but Rodney Eade, Eade did extremely well, and Eade now kicks the ball very well to position all the time. See, this is Wallace taking the ball away, playing it up a little bit further, and really the Essendon centre line had a couple of flat spots in it. Wood really didn't do much with it at all. Nagel, after a promising start, seemed to drop right out of the game, and while Hawker played very well at times and got possession, he really had nowhere to play the ball to, whereas Eade, Wallace and Schwab always had someone to play the position to. And I think that is the biggest difference between the two sides, that the Hawthorn side, even though they were under pressure from the centre line, were able to play it to someone and play it very quickly.
Would you have played Wood or Donnell?
Well, I suppose the Essendon camp really brought Kink and Wood for finals experience, and unfortunately both of them didn't do well yesterday.
But who would you have played?
Well, Wood, if he was fit, I suppose, had played very well in earlier games, and you would have to look at him. Donnell is a lightly framed player. I think he played reasonably well in the reserve, Donnell. But, that's a gamble that the coach had to take with them. But unfortunately, it didn't work out because of the superiority of Eade, Wallace and Schwab. They all played extremely well.
Your votes for yesterday's game, Bob?
I gave one vote to Russell Green, who I thought did a magnificent job all day, played the ball down well. I gave 2 votes to Colin Robertson, who certainly started the Hawthorn game and kept going at it all day. And I gave 3 votes to Terry Wallace, who I thought completely dominated the area that he was supposed to, kept the ball in good supply for Hawthorn all the time, even when they were against the win in the second quarter and they had to really make up for what was a shockingly inaccurate first quarter. I thought he provided that drive extremely well.
Right, Bob, Peter McKenna talks about the attacks in just a moment.
A bit of trouble with the height of that Essendon forward line, but it certainly didn't prove that way. I think that the moves that Alan Jeans made, putting McCarthy down to centre half back, he had that extra height to play on Merritt, and in fact took Merritt right out of the game, and I think that made a big difference to the Essendon forward line, because Merritt's been able to take over at centre half forward in those other games, and I felt the Essendon half forward line fell down very badly yesterday. Rene Kink was well beaten by John Kennedy. Van der Haar, of course, was well held by O'Halloran, playing him close. When Watson went down there, Robertson covered him all over the ground. And of course, Terry Danaher, when the ball did get down to full forward, Chris Muir was playing a great defensive game on him. Their attack was built round Danaher, trying to look for him all the time, but of course Muir was playing him close. Down the other end of the ground, of course, there's Schwab getting the ball down to the Hawthorn forward line. This made it a lot easier for the Hawthorn forwards. There's Matthews getting it out to Tuck, and Tuck, he sneaks down to that forward line, and look at that, he bounces one through for a goal. But Buckenara, they lost him early, and that looked as though it might be dangerous for the Hawthorn side, but good coaching was to put Judge on the bench before the game, and he came on. He's not one of those tear in and knock him over types, but he's got a bit of class, a little bit like Buckenara. There's Dippy. I thought DiPier Domenico was sensational yesterday. His team spirit came on the ground, livened him up, and came off again and tapped his teammate on the head as he went back on, as if to say, get out and you do your job now, and he was fantastic. Great coaching too by Alan Jeans with, there's Merritt going down. He didn't have a kick, elected to give it over there to Weston, who ran down the ground. But great coaching by Jeans to put Knights. He started off right out in the half-forward flank, almost on the boundary line, and when the pack developed, he ran in and went for those big flying marks. Matthews was magnificent up in the full forward or forward pocket, whatever you want to call him. There's Peter Knights taking one of his great marks, and he's got a new lease of life. But getting back to Matthews, with his strength and his great goal-kicking ability, there's Judge. Great overhead for a player who's not a tall player. Byrne did fairly well when he went down there to full forward, took a couple of good marks, but overall they had... And Dermot Brereton, I want to mention him too, because he was sensational early.
Peter, when Wallace got knocked down in that pocket, do you think when Matthews kicked the goal that might have been planned?
Well, I'm
Not
pretty...
the knockdown, but...
Well, I'm pretty sure Terry Wallace could have taken that kick because straight after Matthews kicked the goal, up went Terry Wallace into the centre with his chest stuck out. And no doubt that I reckon that was a bit of a con job because that was the start of Lee Matthews, of course, coming good. He kicked the goal.
That's right.
And for the
Kicked
rest of the
5 others
game,
after.
5 more goals.
How did you vote for yesterday's game, Peter?
Well, I voted 1 to Lethal Lee and up at full forward or forward pocket, whatever you want to call it. I reckon 6 goals in a grand final. Missed 5 shots and his strength, and oh boy, he had a real dip. And certainly was a thorn in the side of Essendon. 2 votes to Colin Robertson. Not only did he defend, he attacked. It was a magnificent game by Colin Robertson. 3 votes, I agree with Lou. I went for John Kennedy. He played Rene Kink very, very close. He attacked, and it's one of the best games I've ever seen John Kennedy put in.
OK, we'll be back to talk.
In mind and limb for Essendon yesterday, and therefore the job was made relatively easy when you take into consideration that Hawthorn had no pressure on them at all at either end of the ground. And they had an uncanny ability, the Hawthorn back line, led by Kennedy, Mew, O'Halloran and McCarthy, to change the direction of play. There's Green, who played a magnificent game out of the half-back line. They had the uncanny ability to switch the play from each side of the ground, and they did it with ease. On the other hand, the Essendon side, I really felt just lacked concentration. You can go into all the postmortems about this game, and it gets down to the fact that they were tired. They were up against a far fresher side, and as a result, Essendon's concentration was at a very low ebb, and that is why they were allowed their opponents to run right. If I could just say, and I know I'm speaking now, there's Peter
You didn't
Knight.
think they were tired last week when you made your statement about Essendon?
No, of course
They
they
get
weren't.
tired over the week, did they?
My word, they did. If you've ever played in 4 finals in a row and tried to win a grand final in your lifetime, you'll never see a 4th or 5th side win the premiership because it is an impossible task.
Well, you were pretty adamant about their form last week.
I was adamant about their form last week, and it was magnificent, and that's what took it out of them. The half-back line, as I said, the back line for Hawthorn, as I said yesterday, they ran in 2s and 3s, they backed up, they did the things that don't get statistics, they shepherded, they talked, they hand-passed the ball out, they scrambled, and I just thought it was a superior display. You can't say anything more about it. Essendon were very shaky on all lines, and particularly their half-back line. Like I just want to say, Ron, I know this is not my area, but I mean, it amazes me how you can sit up there and say that Simon Madden, when Bob Skilton said that Loveridge was the best rover on the ground. Bob Davis gave Eden, Wallace and Robertson a vote for across the centre. So there are the 4 top players on the ground in the centre, and you're talking about Madden trying to palm the ball down to a winning square, a winning set of players in the square. The only alternative he had was to punch the ball as far and as often as he could down towards the forward line of Essendon.
To a losing forward line.
Pardon?
To a losing forward
Well,
line.
isn't it better to get distance rather than to be
Sometimes
thwarted?
it's better to grab the ball, isn't it?
Now, that is just another point I'd like to pick up. And
you've got all the points.
when Farmer grabbed the ball out of the air, you were in those days allowed, there was no line, there was no square around the ground, you were allowed to move in and put your knee into someone and get the ride and take the ball. They have cut that out of football
What about
now.
the boundary throw-ins?
You
What
think
about the
that's
boundary
good for
throw-ins?
Well, you're talking about the centre circle.
That's exactly what I'm talking
I'm
about.
talking about the boundary throw-ins.
Well, no, I'm just talking about getting the ball out of the centre. That's what you said, and he was completely dominant in that regard. And it's no good talking about days gone by because the rules have changed and to cut that very thing out.
Do you agree with that line or not?
Pardon?
Do you agree with the line? If
I do agree with
those
that.
little
Yeah.
winches.
Your votes for yesterday's game, John?
Where'd the little winches
Well,
go?
now, I nearly gave Madden a vote for...
Well, you should have, too.
The only reason I didn't give him a vote, to be honest, was because if I did, you'd say that I'm the coach down there.
come on, that's sad.
I blame the Rovers.
That is nearly gave him 1 vote, but I gave 1 to Wallace, who was supreme, as all the other commentators have said. Green was magnificent on the half-back line. I thought the man who inspired Hawthorn and has done so over the year, considering everything he's gone through, is Peter Knights, and I thought he was magnificent yesterday and a great effort by a champion footballer.
Right, we'll be back to talk with Jack Dyer about what might have happened.
As far as the Battle of Tactics is concerned.
What are you doing tactics for?
Oh, because I know all about the game. I was a losing coach many times, and He did have a big advantage, I would say, with Jeans too, because they had to declare their hand, Essendon, because they had the reserves playing in the ones they had on the reserve bench. They had them playing in the reserve 18. So he knew exactly what team was going to front up for the Essendon side, so he could place his men around beautifully, which he did.
Talking about the reserves, would you have played Andrews?
Well, yes, I'd have put him on about. I'm coming back to that, because that's a bit of Sheedy's bad luck there. His tactics luck went out when he couldn't play Duckworth, and he didn't play Andrews. He should have sat him on the bench, and also Donnell. He should have played those three players, because they're the ones that put him. Well, he couldn't play Duckworth, but they were the fellas that put him into the grand final, and they should have kept going with them. But back to the tactics again. Allowed Jeans to put a few young players around, spread them around the ground, which he did at that stage. New was on Danaher, and I think that's for the great move, but he got a lot of help off O'Halloran too in the back pocket, and it was well thought out, that one indeed. Ayres, of course, was doing his job there in the other back pocket, and of course we had another one going there was McCarthy onto Merritt. Well, it took a lot of thinking out, I think, that one too, because it was a big gamble, and they put this kid in, but once again he got beautiful assistance from the two half-back flankers, and Eden also from Kennedy in particular. So that was good tactics, I thought, and they all came off. But the other one I liked better than anything was when Nagel got on top and he brought Depirio Domenico onto the ground. Now, he's got more enthusiasm than the whole Essendon side, that fellow, and he really shot him right up in the air again.
Jack, I seem to be the only person here that thought Watson went on to Matthews at the start of the game. And I thought that was rather a defensive tactic, and apparently no one else seems to think that Watson started off on
I think he
Matthews.
went down there and spoke to him and come away again, because Carey went on to him down there. I thought that he did go down and have a chat to him and then came away after that, and Carey went on
I'll
at that
bet you he
stage.
played on Matthews down there for
And of course,
first 5 minutes of the game.
Robertson went onto Watson. I thought as soon as the game was started, he went on to Watson and did a great job. As a matter of fact, he lowered his confidence that much that he could go on and play his own game.
Sam, do you think that sides can't play?
I'm too on the tactics, not
Jack, can I
ask me, don't ask Sam.
Uncle John, can I ask you this?
Yes, right.
Do you think that a side that comes from fourth to play sort of four finals can win the grand final?
They can do it. They can do it if they're good enough.
We played 5 and 77.
See, I told you all last week that
you were
Essendon was
playing
playing above themselves.
We did it 5. We played 5 finals and won the last premiership. I don't think we were tied.
Yeah, well, Lou's just answered that. You've got to examine the side you're playing.
playing
You're playing Collingwood.
You know, in the history of the game,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
were
in the history of the game, there
for
only been
Collingwood.
4 come from 4th, 2 come from 3rd, and not 1 come from 5th.
Hey, Jack's on tactics.
Well, this is not tactics. I'm just
This is
giving some
information.
memorabilia.
This is
I know.
information.
Because they're usually the fourth or fifth
And
best
let's
side.
get on to another one too. They swung
These are
Knights
interesting
across from the
tactics,
centre
Jack. I
half
like
forward
this. This is the
position
best you've been,
over to
mate.
the half forward flank position and got him onto Bradbury, which was a great move by Jeans,
Jack, this
because
is the
Knights
best you've
knows
been
all
on
about
tactics.
the game and Bradbury's just learning the game, and then he had a winning side with him and he became a star as it went on. All these things happened for Jeans and nothing happened for poor old Sheedy at all.
what did
He
you
lost
think?
the run of the ball.
What did you think of Sheedy putting Watson on Matthews at the start of the game?
I said he didn't go on. He just went down and said hello to him and came away.
Jack, now what would have been your tactics if you'd have been the coach of Essendon?
Well, I'd have done Donnell playing when you've got a
No,
kid.
not that. You said some other things to me quietly.
Well, they never changed the spot.
Oh, they didn't.
They never changed their
You
spots.
vote for yesterday's game, Jack.
Oh, wait, I've got a lovely lot of tactics yet.
Jack,
What other one?
Jack, congratulations. That's the best tactics I've ever heard in my life,
half of
mate.
you fellas have been doing all the time, but if they're not playing side, like in a football side, I think anyone's coached a side must know that when a side goes that badly, it's hard to do anything at all. You can't adjust. Well, they've got on top of you, your confidence is going down the chute, and you haven't got those experienced players there. But I gave 1 point to Kennedy. I thought his first half was absolutely brilliant. How he played like it, I don't know. Robertson, well, you had to give it to Robertson because he's had a little finger on him for the whole year, this fella, and he certainly answered a few questions yesterday, I thought, with a bit of pace and also a bit of aggression here and there along the line, and a great game by Robertson. And my man was the one that won the match, and that was Matthews. How far the cherry, this fella. Like, I don't know whether he's improving, this fella, but I think the other blokes are deteriorating. I'm terribly sorry to take that away from him because Matthews covered the waterfront down there.
The waterfront?
Yeah, well, whatever it was. And he
dominated his area,
He
Jack.
dominated this area down there. He showed them how to play the game, what you do, how to look after players, how to bring players into the game.
Above
He did
ground
everything you
segregation,
expect the champion to do yesterday. And It was a marvellous performance. To kick 6 goals in the grand final, it's not done too much at all in the finals. And
Who did you give your best player to?
I thought it was Matthews.
You like Lee Matthews, do you, Jack?
I love him. He would be the first player you'd ever pick in a football side. Like if you walked in, well, not now, of course, because he's nearly 32 or something. I don't know what he is.
Oh, you'd still pick him now.
I think I might have a nibble in him too. I would. If you want to win premierships, that's
Right,
if you
let's
want to
see how
win
the tallies
premierships.
came up for our World of Sport commentators on yesterday's grand final. 12 votes to Robertson, 11 to Kennedy, 5 to Matthews, 4 to Wallace, 3 to Green, 3 to Knights, 3 to Mew, and 1 to...